The Tech It Up Talk podcast aspires to educate, inform, and inspire educators from teachers to school leaders on tips, tools, and resources to support the integration of technology into classroom instruction.
You ready? Here we go.
You're listening to Tech It Up Talk with Dr. Mac, your host with the most passion for supporting educators from teachers to school leaders with the integration of technology into instruction. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of Tech It Up Talk. In today's episode, we're going to have an exciting one as we'll be discussing revolutionizing instruction through the SAMR framework. Our aim is to bring you valuable insights that will empower educators and educational leaders to create meaningful learning environments, ultimately making a significant impact on student performance. And today, we have a phenomenal guest with us, someone whose journey in education is nothing short of inspiring. Our esteemed guest today brings a wealth of knowledge and expertise to the table, and I can't wait to explore.
Thank you, Dr. Mack, for having me. My name is Dr. Coleman, and I am so excited to be here. A little bit about me is that I am currently an assistant principal, a best-selling author, national presenter, and I've done many things in education as far as curriculum writing, academic coaches, and being an academic coach and different things of that nature. My journey started as a teacher in third grade, and I thought that, the best way to revolutionize how students should learn is through technology. And so I taught that to my students because they were having a hard time understanding concepts and skills and different things of that nature with the curriculum that we had. So I brought little things in to help support them in that manner. And I took that as a stance to be able to do something different in the classroom, such as giving them ownership within the classroom, learning how to teach them, as well as push myself as an educator and doing research within the work that we were doing and using Promethean boards in the classrooms, learning having to use flexible seating, creating presentations and different things of that nature of student ownership within the classroom. And all of this revolution helped me understand the framework that we were using, which came from SAMR.
All right. Well, your dedication is definitely evident. And so as you've already shared, the goal of our episode today is really to discuss revolutionizing instruction with SAMR. And so your knowledge and expertise can definitely help support our educators and our educational leaders with creating those meaningful learning environments. And so, Dr. Coleman, my first question for you is, for our listeners who may not be familiar with SAMR, or maybe this may be new to them, maybe they heard of it before, I'm not sure completely what it entails. Can you explain SAMR as a model in simple terms, and how it can be used to guide technology integration?
Absolutely. SAMR is a framework that was created by Dr. Puntendera, and basically it's used to support a systematic method incorporating technology. And basically that just means, how can the teacher figure out how to use that framework within their classroom of where they stand? So the model can be used based on the overall aspect in regards to what assignment that the teacher wants to use in the classroom. It doesn't always have to be in every lesson. It doesn't have to be in every component of the classroom. And so basically just giving the general aspect of what you're doing. So basically the teacher can decide of the 4 parts of what SAMR definitely means. And that is S is for substitution, A for augmentation, M for modification, and R for redefinition. And a little later, we'll go into detail of how to use those things in the classroom on those each parts of where the teacher is, but basically just first deciding where does the teacher fall in regards to SAMR and how we're going to get that comfortability down first, and then moving it into the teaching aspect within the lessons for the student.
Okay. And so can you go ahead and provide us with some examples of how teachers have successfully implemented SAMR?
Yes, definitely I can. So just in the manner of how teachers have done it. So basically with SAMR, if you are using it on the substitution model, that is where there's no functional change in regards to technology. It's just a direct substitute. The A, the augmentation, is where basically there's a functional improvement with technology being a direct substitute. And M is the modification, where a task is basically to redesign what is happening when you're using the technology. and R is definition of where the creation of new tasks are created in regards to that. Would you like for me to go ahead and give you actual teacher examples of what they were doing as well, to just kind of give you just some more examples of that?
Sure. Yes.
Okay.
Yes, go for it.
Definitely. So I can think of teachers that I've actually coached in regards to this. And so in one manner, there was a teacher who was in the modification phase. So she figured she was able to use technology in her classroom and to do all the great things. And so she decided to use Google Classroom and Schoology as a way to approach those tasks in her classroom, such as messaging students, tracking her grades, creating calendars, creating assignments. And so this basically allowed the educator to be able to be on the level to differentiate what was happening in her classroom, as well as giving her students accountability in the classroom, to where it wasn't just on her, but it was on them as well. And she was also a person that came into a state of duality of the teacher, of being able to know that this was a new approach of them approaching and engaging in the learning at the same time. She knew that she was modifying her lessons to fit the needs of her students, but also to transform them into a bigger place and have a greater audience of what they were trying to do. One other teacher, she was in the last phase. She was in the redefinition phase. And this is where her instructional approach was changing. And she was changing the way teaching was going. She was changing the way thinking was going in her classroom, as far as the tasks and lessons that she was completing before she integrated technology versus what she was doing now. And she had set her students up to where they were interacting with each other. They were listening to each other. They were having voices with each other. So where the students were peer tutoring, they were having daily experiences with their Flipgrids, and Flipgrid is a resource to where students can actually speak to responses and different things. And then the peer tutor could actually respond to that student who has responded on Flipgrid. They were using Google Hangouts or Google Meets, and she was giving them time to be able to be together, work together, and listen to each other, as well as know that their voices meant something to each other. So they were looking for their peers to be able to give them feedback, to be able to socialize, be able to understand that they could communicate in those different ways. This allowed her classroom to grow in so many manners because they were taking accountability and responsibility for themselves and their learning.
Yeah, and so implementing like new instructional models often require professional development. How can schools and educators effectively train and support each other to integrate SAMR into their teaching practices?
One definite way that they can do that is, one, I would definitely say training the teachers that will come to the campus with district initiatives surrounding with technology integration, taking it step by step, piece by piece. Don't try to do it all at one time. Also collaborating with one another. Don't try to do it all by yourself. You must collaborate with each other. You must have voices. You must have thought partners in regards to this, because you don't want someone to get lost in the shuffle of trying to integrate something and not really knowing how to integrate it. But I will say this about the SAMR model and framework. There is not one specific way that you have to do it. Say, okay, it must be done this way, or you must start at the substitution, or you must start at redefinition. That also, like I said, it depends on where the teacher is, where the lesson is that the teacher is implementing, and where your students are. So you have to look at all of those things to decide what part of the SAMR model you're going to use when you are implementing this framework based on what you're trying to do and what you're trying to accomplish.
Okay, thank you. Now, how does the SAMR model impact student engagement and motivation in the learning process?
So how does that impact? So the model impacts the student engagements through being through challenging the students in the manner of being intentional, having intentional interactions with their faculty, with their peers. And you also see that the students have a motivation to learn because of the simple fact that they have the options to be able to know that they're taking the content that they're learning and they're using it with a balance of technology within it. And so if the students are able to see that the work that they're doing is valuable and it's important to the teacher and it's important to themselves, it gives them that ability to know that this is mine. I'm proud of it. I want to show it off. I want to show what I'm explaining. So that's where that intentional interaction comes in with the student motivation.
All right, excellent. Now, in context with educational equity, how can the SAMR model be applied to ensure that all students, regardless of the background, have access to transformative learning experiences?
Okay, so not every element in our classes has to be transformational, okay? In some cases, I will say students will, turn in a computer document essay instead of having it handwritten on a paper, okay? That's, pretty acceptable. Other times, you really want students to have the interactive element to where you're getting them to where they're working with people across the class, maybe across different programs, institutions. But again, that goes back to collaboration within the field to making sure you're producing the content the way that you want to, which also fosters critical thinking. The SAMR model can definitely be aligned to ensuring that all students can have access to that transformative learning by the teacher creating that space. In regards to the students learning how to think about what their experimental learning, will be when it is necessary. The learning process can be for students in regards to how you want to scaffold, the process before adding the technology to the classroom. A teacher can gain this by following different questions through that model of each phase. So if you're the teacher and you're trying to figure out where to start, questions that I would think that you would ask yourself is like for substitution. What are you going to gain when I replace this task with the new technology? Or augmentation. What features might improve the task? Or modification. Am I significantly changing what the task is? Or redefinition. Am I in the position where the original task has been transformed into something completely new? So those are questions that I would definitely ask as myself as the teacher or educator when I'm thinking about implementing the technology into the classroom or into a lesson to my student.
Okay. And now let's move on to advice for educators. So if someone's looking to start integrating or just move and shift along the spectrum of SAMR into their teaching or even coaching, what advice would you give them? And then are there any specific steps or resources that they should consider for implementation?
So advice that I would definitely give is for a teacher who is starting this integration process, the teacher needs to determine where they are, as I've stated already, in regards to that framework. Once the model is determined, or once the teacher determines where they are, they can find examples of what technology they want to integrate, such as instead of using a regular paper document, you can use a computer or a slide presentation created from that paper document. Resources to consider would be just to start with something simple, such as Google Classroom or Schoology as a way to communicate with students in the classroom, as well as to house documents for information for students in the classroom. One other definitely thing I would do when you're starting this process, don't go over maybe 1 to 3 different resources within that so you're not overwhelming yourself, because you want to make sure that you're able to master those 1 to 3 resources first before trying to add something else on, and just give yourself at least 3 to 6 weeks within that new link or new technology that you're using and seeing how it's progressing before adding on something else.
Well, let's go ahead and move on to our next segment that I like to call Get Your Tech Together. And you kind of let us in with the technology tool that, that they may be using. So what are some must-have tools that educators should have in their toolbox to support implementation of SAMR model?
I would definitely, for each part or each phase of the model, I would do specific things or have resources, such as for substitution, I would use Google Drive or Microsoft Documents, Google Forms in regards to taking assessments or for surveys online to take a poll. The third one would be Jamboard or Padlet instead of, using paper. So again, as I've stated, in the earlier segment, using only maybe 1 to 3 different things to use and gradually increase. Augmentation, I would again go with Google Slides, Google Documents to collaborate with your peers for editing and highlighting on a document, as well as sharing digital notes. Modification, I will use collaborations for tools to design and or possibly like submit a project such as Google Draw. Second thing I will use for modification would be like combining audio, video, and text in a presentation as a formative or summative assessment. Again, keeping it 1 to 3 different things that I would use in each part or each phase of the SAMR model. Finally, for redefinition, I would use designing projects that allow for differentiated instruction based on your time, your space, your place, and your need, using collaborative mind maps and presentations based on interactive feedback to where students are sharing projects, they're learning from other students, even maybe from across the world or other websites or blogs.
All right. Thank you for that. So as we kind of wrap up our conversation, I want you to share with our listeners, what are your top 3 tips to take away about using SAMR as a framework?
My top 3 tips. Now, if you are just going to take anything away, these are the 3 things that I will use, and I'll kind of elaborate on them as I go. Number 1, use the SAMR framework as a guide. Think of this framework as a technology tool that you can use. Find the right tool and use it for your lesson that you plan to teach. Determine if the technology will enhance or transform the learning process. If it does, then use it in the lesson. If not, then go with your traditional approach. Number 2, collaborate with others. Collaborating with your peers within the same and different content areas to broaden your scope of thinking. Creating lessons across various contents, which allow students to create spaces and platforms to show their thinking. And number 3, opportunities for transformation. Find opportunities to use technologies that expose your students to local and global interactions to showcase their learning. This will help build their cultural understanding of others, how to use technology etiquette, and build literacy skills.
So thank you again so much for joining us, Dr. Coleman. Can you just share with our listeners how they can connect with you and be a part of your learning network?
Yes, ma'am. You can definitely connect with me through my email address, aftoncoleman1@gmail.com, LinkedIn at Dr. Affton Coleman, Twitter at Dr._AftonC, Instagram at Dr. Affton Coleman, and Facebook at Dr. Affton Coleman.
And that wraps up another enlightening episode of Tech It Up Talk. A big thank you to our incredible guest, Dr. Affton Coleman, for sharing her invaluable insights on revolutionizing instruction through SAMR framework. We hope you, our listeners, had a fantastic time, have gained fresh perspectives and actionable ideas to enhance your instructional practices. But before we go, remember to connect with us to stay updated on all things Tech It Up Talk. Follow us on all of your favorite social media platforms at Tech It Up Talk. Whether it's X, Facebook, Instagram, or LinkedIn, we want to hear from you. Share your thoughts, ideas, and suggestions for future episodes. Also, be sure to get a copy of our book, Get Your Tech Together, available on Amazon. And don't forget to subscribe, rate, and leave a review if you enjoyed today's episode. Your feedback means the world to me. And until next time, keep it innovating, keep learning, and keep teching it up.